The Wilson family reunion felt exactly as exhausting as I remembered. Lavish, overdone, and oozing with polished arrogance. My aunt's estate looked like something out of a magazine. Gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, servers in white, gloves offering champagne like it was water. And yet somehow, it all felt hollow. Like it was built more for show than comfort. I stood near the edge of the room, invisible but very much observing. My cousins were already loud with self-congratulations. Ethan bragging about his law firm's latest acquisition. James reciting numbers that didn't impress anyone except himself. Patricia, the queen bee of the Wilson family, had stationed herself near the bar, holding court like she always did. I'd chosen a simple black dress, understated makeup, and low heels. Not because I didn't have better in my closet. God knows I did. But because I wanted to remind myself of who I used to be. I heard her voice before I saw her. Poor girl, still a secretary? Patricia's words cut through the crowd like a shard of glass. I turned, slowly, my face blank, but my pulse racing. She wore a champagne-colored silk gown, a designer clutch dangling from her hand. Her expression was a perfect blend of amusement and pity, like I was a charity case she was gracious enough to acknowledge. "Hi, Aunt Patricia," I said with a practiced smile. "Nice to see you too." She didn't stop. She never did. "I thought you'd have grown out of that little admin job by now," she continued, voice syrupy sweet. "Still at that. What was it called? Summit something?" My champagne glass tilted slightly in my hand, but I didn't break eye contact. "Still there," I replied. "Administrative assistant?" James leaned in from behind her, smirking. "Come work for me, Liv. I'll pay you double what you make sorting someone else's mail." Laughter. Soft, cruel, familiar. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to consider. Was that the company they mocked? Was mine. Their $100 acquisition deal? It needed my signature. And tomorrow morning, they were walking into a meeting with my firm, completely unaware that the assistant they were so fond of belittling would be sitting at the head of the table. Aunt Patricia laughed again, turning away without waiting for my response. I took a slow sip of champagne and smiled to myself. 10. Years ago, I stood in this same house, in this same overpriced ballroom, with stars in my eyes and a binder clutched tightly in my arms. I had just graduated business school, top of my class. I'd spent a full year building a pitch deck that I truly believed could change the future of how struggling companies were restructured. I was nervous, but ready. I believed, naively, that my family would support me. They didn't. Consulting? Uncle Robert had snorted, not even bothering to hide the derision in his voice. "That's for the big boys, sweetheart. You want to play business, start in the mailroom," Cousin Ethan had chimed in with a smirk. "Or just marry rich and save. Yourself the trouble." Aunt Patricia didn't say anything that day. She just smiled and sipped her wine like my dreams were too boring to even mock. That night, I sat alone in the guest room, my proposal binder unopened on the dresser, and made 2 promises to myself. 1. I would never ask them for anything. Again. 2. I would make them regret underestimating me. It began with a 400-square-foot office above a Chinese restaurant. The walls were stained, the heat barely worked, and the plumbing made sounds I still can't explain. But it was mine. With what little savings I had left, I registered a company under the name Summit Solutions. I chose the name because it sounded solid, respectable, exactly the opposite of how I felt at the time. No investors, no connections, just a cheap laptop, a second-hand desk, and a gut instinct that I could fix broken things better than anyone else. My first client was a small manufacturing company 2 weeks away from bankruptcy. The owner had been denied help by every major firm in the city. No one took him seriously. I did. I spent sleepless nights combing through his contracts, renegotiating vendor terms, rebuilding his logistics process from the ground up. It took 3 months. 6 months later, they were profitable. That's how it started. Word spread, quietly, behind closed doors. No flashy marketing, no headlines, just whispers in the right rooms. There's this consulting firm. They don't advertise, but they save you when no one else can. I made one rule from day one: discretion above everything. Every employee I hired signed an ironclad NDA. My name never appeared on public documents. I was the ghost behind the curtain. The woman who dropped off the coffee in morning meetings was the one signing million-dollar contracts behind closed doors. I kept my title low, administrative assistant. I even kept the Chinese restaurant office as a decoy, and when family asked about my job, I'd shrug and say, still at Summit, filing things, taking calls, nothing important. Their eyes would glaze over, and they'd move on, completely unaware that I was building something they'd one day need to survive. Over the next few years, I handpicked a team that believed in silent excellence. We didn't chase headlines. We chased results. We saved failing companies. We turned debt-ridden disasters into thriving enterprises. We became the quiet enemy of predatory firms, especially firms like my family's. Wilson Ventures made their money swallowing weak companies. Whole. I made mine keeping those companies alive long enough to fight back. Sometimes, I even saved the very businesses they were targeting. They never suspected it was me. They never saw the pattern. They never looked past the woman carrying the coffee tray, and honestly, that was my favorite part. Now, 10 years later, Summit Solutions had offices in 12 cities. We had restructured over 300 companies. We were managing billions in assets, and somehow, I was still the poor girl in the black dress. That reunion wasn't the first time Aunt Patricia mocked me. It wouldn't be the last. But this time, I wasn't just holding back out of pride. This time, I was waiting. Because tomorrow morning, the same people who once told me I was only good enough to sort mail would be sitting across from me, begging for a merger. They had no idea the CEO they were desperate to meet was the secretary they had ignored for a decade, and I couldn't wait to see their faces. I left the reunion early. No dramatic exit. No parting words. Just a quiet smile and a polite, "I have an early meeting." Patricia didn't even look up from her glass of wine. "Taking notes for someone important, I hope," she smirked. Something like that. The next morning, I stood inside the private elevator of Summit Solutions' downtown headquarters. Gone was the plain black dress. Today, I wore a deep navy Chanel suit, perfectly tailored with a gold pin at the collar. Power was subtle. You didn't need to shout when you were the one holding the pen that could approve or end a $100 million deal. The elevator. Doors opened directly into our executive floor. Maya, my assistant, was waiting. "They're here," she said without looking up from her tablet. "Your uncle, 2 cousins, and Patricia. She came even though she's not technically part of the negotiation." "Of course she did," I murmured. "Are they in the main conference room?" She nodded. "And fuming. Your aunt's complaining that no one offered them coffee. Your cousin Ethan asked for someone from admin support." I smiled. "Tell them the administrative assistant will be in shortly." Maya raised an eyebrow. "They really don't know, do they?" "No," I said, smoothing my sleeve. "They've never looked long enough to find out." From behind the heavy glass doors of the conference room, I could hear them. My uncle's authoritative bark, Ethan's too confident tone, Patricia's signature sigh of annoyance. I knew those voices better than I cared to admit. The very people who mocked me into silence now needed my consent, and they thought they were here to intimidate a stranger. 10 minutes later, Maya leaned in and whispered, "Ready?" I nodded once. "Bring the contracts." Then I opened the doors and walked in. Silence. Aunt Patricia was the first to speak. "Olivia?" What on earth are you? Her eyes scanned my suit, my posture, my hands. Empty. No coffee, no notebook, no tray. Where's the... I don't serve coffee anymore, I said evenly. In fact, I never really did. My uncle frowned, already losing patience. What is this? Where's the actual CEO? We have a meeting scheduled with Summit's leadership. I walked to the head of the table, the seat he'd clearly claimed but hadn't yet earned, and sat down. You have, I said calmly. I'm Olivia Wilson, founder and CEO of Summit Solutions. For a moment, no one breathed. Ethan blinked like he couldn't understand English. James opened his mouth, then closed it. Patricia stared, her painted lips parting, but no sound coming out. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. You? Uncle Robert finally growled. You're just a secretary. I've seen you at that little Chinatown office, which was a decoy, I said smoothly. You think I'd put my real operation somewhere you could stumble across it? That office was for appearances, a role I played, well, for your benefit. I gestured toward the stack of folders Maya had just laid on the table. These are the merger terms your legal team spent the last 2 months negotiating. The same legal team that, by the way, has been working under a shell client listed as Orion Holdings. That holding company belongs to me. Ethan's jaw dropped. I wasn't. Done. Peterson Electronics. Maritime Shipping. The Davidson Group. You tried to acquire them. You failed. I tapped my fingers slowly on the table. My firm made sure of it. Every time you went hunting, we were already there. Quietly cleaning up. Quietly protecting. This is sabotage, James hissed. No, I said with a smile. This is strategy. The kind you never taught your daughters, remember? Uncle Robert slammed his fist on the table. We gave you everything. You gave me insults, I replied. Dismissals, a mold to fit into. And when I didn't fit, you ignored me. Patricia finally found her voice. You're nothing. You've always been nothing. A glorified assistant pretending to be important. Is that why your precious deal now depends on my approval? I said, tilting my head. Because I'm so unimportant? The air was thick with stunned silence. And then I dropped the final blow. By the way, I added casually, that champagne you served last night at the reunion? The vineyard was in foreclosure 3 years ago. I bought it, rebuilt it. It's mine now. And the coffee you were so desperate for this morning? I smiled. My chain, too. We serve it in all 12 Summit Solutions offices. Their faces were everything I imagined they'd be. Red, pale, frozen, and for the first time in a decade, they were listening. Really listening, Ethan finally spoke. You can't be serious. This is some elaborate prank. You, CEO? I turned to Maya. Can you project our latest valuation, please? She tapped her tablet. A sleek digital graph appeared on the screen behind me. Summit Solutions, I said clearly, currently manages over $122 billion in client assets. We've restructured 300-plus companies with a documented 94% success rate. Our advisory services are retained by Fortune 500 clients, multinational conglomerates, and mid-tier firms you've been trying, and failing, to acquire for the past 3 years. I let that sink in. Still think I'm playing pretend, James? Stared at the screen like it was a death sentence. Aunt Patricia finally whispered, This is impossible. No, I said, locking eyes with her. This is earned. Mr. Harrison, representing Williams Manufacturing, the company they were trying to merge with, cleared his throat. We reached out to Summit when Wilson Ventures tried to force a hostile acquisition. Their team not only saved our company, they turned us profitable in under 90 days. Uncle Robert's knuckles were white on the edge of the table. You deliberately sabotaged our family business, he spat. No, I corrected. I saved companies you wanted to break apart for. Spare parts. If that hurt your plans, well, I suppose that's just business, isn't it? Ethan pushed back his chair. I'm calling our lawyers. Already did, I said. The contracts your team worked on, the ones you desperately needed signed today, they were brokered by Summit. Every clause, every term, every timeline. Your firm worked for me, without even knowing it. Maya handed Ethan a fresh folder. His hands shook as he flipped through it. Page 6, I said. That's where your firm officially acknowledges Summit as the senior partner. He looked up slowly, horror blooming behind his eyes. You played us. I gave you a chance, I replied. You just never looked closely enough to realize it. Aunt Patricia stood. This is blackmail. This is accountability, I said. I stood with her. You all taught me something. That power is inherited. That girls like me don't lead. That I should stay small, polite, invisible. I paused. Let the silence settle. But you were wrong. I didn't disappear. I just stopped performing for you. Uncle Robert's voice cracked with anger. You're still a Wilson. You're still family. And that's why I'm offering you generous terms, I said, walking slowly behind my chair. You have until 5 p.m. today to sign the merger documents. If you do, I continued, Summit will absorb Wilson Ventures under a new leadership model, ethical, transparent, sustainable. You'll keep your positions. You'll save face. And if we don't, then Summit begins purchasing Wilson Ventures stock on the open market tomorrow morning, I said without hesitation. Within 2 quarters, I'll own enough to dissolve the board. No one said a word, no arguments, no denials, just stunned, deflated silence. I picked up my clutch. Meeting's over. Maya will walk you out. I paused at the door. Oh, and Aunt Patricia. I turned slightly, enough for her to see the smile on my face. That champagne you offered me last night? I own the vineyard. And the coffee you were so eager to complain about this morning? I raised an eyebrow. My chain. My blend. Then, I opened the door and walked out, the click of my heels echoing through the hallway like punctuation on a final sentence. In my private office, I finally let the adrenaline leave my body. 10 years of playing small. 10 years of pouring coffee with a smile while signing 7-figure contracts behind closed doors. 10 years of being invisible. For this moment. Maya entered silently and set down a cup on my desk. My favorite? I asked. She smiled. From your chain, brewed by your barista, using your beans. I took a sip. Strong. Perfect. Worth the wait? She asked. I looked down at the skyline through my glass office window and nodded slowly. Every second. The messages started rolling in before I even finished my coffee. Aunt Patricia. Darling, let's have lunch. You were always my favorite niece. Ethan. Come on, Liv, we were just messing around. Family should stick together. James. You can't do this to us. We're blood. I didn't reply. They'd had a decade to see me. Now they could sit in the silence I once lived in. By noon, Wilson Ventures had called an emergency board meeting. By 3, they had unanimously accepted Summit's merger terms. Uncle Robert, predictably, didn't go quietly. He stormed into my office unannounced, his face red with betrayal. You've disgraced this family, he growled. I didn't look up from my screen. Actually, I'd argue I protected it. From itself. You've destroyed everything we built. No, I said, calmly closing my laptop. I built something better. You just refused to see it. He glared at me, but there was something new behind his eyes. Not anger, defeat. You think this makes you powerful? He asked, his voice softer now. No, I replied. Power isn't in owning a company. It's in how you run it. I handed him the final folder. These are the finalized terms. Summit will acquire a controlling interest. You can stay on as a consultant if you're willing to support our new direction. He opened the folder with trembling hands. You thought of everything. Ike offered a small, cold smile. I learned from the best. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly and left. Within a week, the news hit the press. Secret CEO revealed. Woman builds billion-dollar empire in silence. Wilson family stunned by relatives' hidden success story. My phone buzzed again, but this time, the message made me pause. It was from my mother, the one who had divorced Uncle Robert's brother decades ago, the one who had quietly stepped away from the family's poison. Just 5 words. I always knew you would. The weeks that followed felt like rewriting history. Business schools invited me to speak. Female founders reached out to share their stories. Interns cried in elevators saying, "Thank you. I thought I had to choose between success and self-respect." Patricia tried to spin the story to the media. We always knew Olivia had potential. I released an old video clip from a previous reunion, 20 minutes of her explaining why I'd never amount to anything. It went viral. She stopped giving interviews after that. Ethan claimed he'd known all along, but his firm's clients had seen the footage. Within a month, he was asked to take an indefinite leave. James tried to pitch a Wilson Summit alliance. I turned him down over lunch. "We don't dominate," I told him. "We elevate." But the real victory came quietly. At an industry gala, I accepted the Business Innovation Award. My mother sat in the front row, beaming. Behind her were 3 women who used to be my assistants, now managers, directors, executives. They had helped me hide my identity while building their own. I stepped up to the microphone. "Success isn't about showing power," I told the crowd. "It's about building it, silently, ethically, and without asking for permission." For 10 years, I let people underestimate me. I let them think I was small. Because sometimes the best way to build something big is when no one's watching. The applause was loud, but my peace was louder. That night, Maya entered my office holding a newspaper. Front page, "The secretary who owned the room." "Next year's reunion?" she asked, teasing. I smiled. "We'll host it here, in the main conference room." She laughed. "Should I order catering?" "Yes. And coffee." "The good stuff?" she asked. I nodded. "From our chain." As I turned to the glass, I caught my reflection. No longer the woman in the corner, blending into the walls. No longer invisible. They used to see me as the girl who brought coffee. Now they ask if I'll sign their future. And sometimes, I don't. What did this story make you think? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.